Hello and welcome. Today's topic is SD-WAN for next generation retail networks with special focus on enterprises doing business in Asia Pacific. We have a guest speaker, Kieran Roche, CTO of CoEvolve and technology blogger. From VelaCloud, we have Kangwon Chintamit, Director of Solutions and a CCIE in Routing, Switching, and Security. Before we start, a couple of administrative items. We are recording this webinar, and you will receive a link to the recording shortly after the session. The presentation slides, as well as other resources, can be found by clicking the Attachments button in your interface. While we do have time at the end of the session for Q&A, feel free to send your questions in at any time. And now, welcome, Kieran and Kangwon.
Great. Thank you, Sasha, and thank you to everybody for joining. My name is Kieran Roche, the CTO and one of the founders of CoEvolve, based in Chicago in the US, but our business has a really heavy focus on the Asia-Pac market, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. I'm joined today by Kangwon. Kangwon, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, thank you, Kieran. Thank you everyone for joining. So my name is Kangwon Chintamit. I'm Director of Solution Architect with VelaCloud. So actually I'm originally from Thailand, and even though I'm based in the US now, I've been working a lot with customers in Asia Pacific, specifically Southeast Asia, to help them architect and deploy SD-WAN solutions into their network.
Great. Thanks, Kangwon. To share just a few brief details about CoEvolve, we're a business that was purpose-built to help enterprises adopt next-generation technologies, and in particular SD-WAN. And we recognized that there was a lot of innovation going into products in the SD-WAN space, and we wanted to build a business that could help enterprises that were interested in this technology, but perhaps didn't have the internal resources or had other challenges related to driving the adoption of those technologies. So we work with enterprises across a large number of industry sectors, but retail is probably one of the most clear-cut examples of an industry that can benefit from some of the benefits that SD-WAN can deliver. So we'll talk, the high level of focus on the retail sector today, because we think this is an area that can have a real benefit for this industry sector. CoEvolve also provides a range of other related and complementary services to SD-WAN, so in the vendor management space and some others as well, which are particularly relevant to the retail space, and especially in the Asia-Pac market, we see that being some of the most challenging parts of the world from a telecoms perspective, and a lot of effort needed to get that right. And we've done this quite a lot for enterprises in the region already. So we've focused the business on helping to solve challenges in some of these really difficult markets, as well as some of the developed markets where, on the face of it, you might think there's not a particularly big challenge in getting connectivity. But in the retail sector, the single biggest challenge that we hear on a very regular basis comes down to price. These are tight margin businesses. They don't have a lot of budget to spare to spend on new innovative technology. It really is a price sensitive market. So the ability to use SD-WAN as an enabler for even lower cost technology, whether that's wired or wireless, is a real important factor in being able to get the value that we need out of this technology. So why is this important in the retail space? Well, if we look at what's happening in the retail sector, this is an industry sector that has just completely transformed in recent years. There's just a huge focus now on trying to get a completely different in-store experience for the end users, and it's very difficult to do that with traditional technologies. There's a requirement to get improved content served to the locations with digital signage, kiosks, for example, that can serve dynamic content very easily out to the users and have that highly targeted and so on. That extends then into IT automation, virtual desktop functionality inside the retail store, things like this are a very difficult challenge to solve with traditional networks. The universal one that we hear again and again is delivering Wi-Fi services to the end users, improving the point of sale functionality. Across the whole store, we start to see just a real change in the functionality and services that are being expected in order to transform this store experience. And it used to be that these retail stores could operate on some pretty thin bandwidths, and we've seen even satellite connectivity used quite frequently in many traditional retail store environments because all they cared about was carrying the point of sale traffic. What we're finding though is that as these new innovations get rolled out to the retail environment, there's an expectation that there's effectively an infinite amount of capacity available on the network to be able to support these services. And what enterprises have found in the retail space is that that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of what they've had to deal with. They've got networks that are very capacity constrained, very high latency, very poor performance levels, and that just isn't typically good enough to deliver the experience that they want. And we've seen the SD-WAN technology be of particular interest in this industry sector because it is acting as an enabler for all of these initiatives that the modern retail organization wants to be able to adopt. And the ability to do that without having dramatic, exponential increases in the network infrastructure cost is of particular interest. And all of these initiatives will be effectively non-starters if they required the delivery of high-speed fiber connectivity to the retail stores and so on. Retailers just typically do not have the budget for that capacity, but they're still being challenged to deliver all of these improved user experiences. And it all tends to be part of a broader initiative in the retail space, which is a phrase we hear very frequently, this omni-channel capability. So the ability to have complete control over that end user experience, starting in the retail stores, but being able to extend that into other online and mobile channels then. And retailers are particularly interested in the ability to use additional data within those networks. So the ability to track visitors as they move around the store. Initiatives like that generate vast amounts of data that require a very robust network in order to turn that into a reality. So what we've seen is that with all of these initiatives, the real bottleneck, and I'll maybe ask Kangwar to share some of his experiences on this in a moment, the WAN tends to be the bottleneck. You can solve the LAN side issues and get more bandwidth, and next generation wireless access points and so on can deliver a great experience on the LAN side, but getting all of that traffic out onto the WAN has always been the challenge. Kangwar, you've dealt a lot in this industry sector as well, I know, over the years. Maybe like to speak to some of your experience here with these challenges?
Yeah, definitely. So if you think about like the example that Kiran talked about earlier, right? It's the ultimate retail experience. I always think of like the Apple Store, right? So imagine that you walk into an Apple Store, and many of us may have that experience before, right? You walk into the store, your phone directly connected to the guest Wi-Fi, right? You can browse the internet, and you see all the store associates walking around with a tablet, right? Or like a mobile device that you can actually check you out, right? And then you see all this digital advertising, right? On the screen, you can actually try out the equipment, right? Browse the web, and it's very, very fast. So if you think about it, actually the WAN is the lifeline of the Apple Store, right? Because if the WAN goes down, the problem is they cannot even check your account, right? If you want to buy a phone, they cannot even activate your phone, right? So they're basically losing the revenue. So for them, the WAN is important. So what they did was they actually bring in fiber, right? I mean, they have multiple redundant WAN devices just to make sure that they can maintain that great in-store experience, right, for their customer. But when you think of the typical retail, right, not everyone is as lucky as Apple, right, in terms of having all the budget available, right, to be able to invest in the infrastructure in the store. So a lot of time, I mean, they have very similar initiatives, right? I want to offer the guest Wi-Fi, right? I want to offer like mobile check-in, right? Mobile checkout. and I want to do digital signage. But when I add up all the cost, right, to basically increase my MPLS bandwidth 3 or 4 times, then I don't have the justification, right, to do all these projects that I want to do. And so that's become like very common with a lot of the retail customers that we talk to, right? The bandwidth is too expensive. And then also the other problem that we see very common is as the number of stores increases, right? The larger they are, the less of the IT budget they have in terms of the personnel that they have to manage and monitor, right, and keep all these stores up and running. And then many of them have looked at the internet, right? I mean, initially just to be a backup link. But any one of them that try to look into using the internet as the primary link, right, to deliver some of their applications, like phone, run into a reliability of the internet link. So they're fighting the cost versus the performance reliability issue. And then yeah. And then the last thing that we've seen is the footprint, right, of the store. Traditionally, I mean, if you think of like a routing device, it's a big box that you may have to rack mount it, right? But some of the new stores is pretty lean. There's no space to mount like number of equipment, right, in the store anymore. So these are some of the typical problems that we see that the retail store has.
Great, thanks, Kangwon. And yeah, those challenges definitely resonate with us from the retailers that we've worked with, and especially in the Asia Pacific region, those connectivity charges mount up pretty quickly, and trying to get the necessary capacity using business-grade connectivity and fiber-based connectivity and so on is often just not even an option for these retailers. So we're going to talk today about how we can deliver a cloud-delivered SD-WAN solution as a potential solution to this. And again, I'll come back to Kangwon in a moment just to share his perspective on the technology. But speaking from our perspective as an advisor to enterprises and a provider of some of these services to retailers, we see this as a pretty important transformation in the capabilities that retailers can take advantage of. So one of the key principles of the cloud-delivered SD-WAN solution is that it allows the retailer to separate the underlying connectivity from the overall architecture of the network. So that's one really important benefit, that they're no longer tied to using a single carrier with a single product that has to somehow fit into all of their different locations, which could span different geographies and different sizes of locations and so on. And instead, it allows them to really optimize down to the per location level to find the best form of connectivity. So that's a pretty huge change for enterprises, to be able to have a free range of options to choose from rather than being constrained to one particular vendor or one particular technology. So bigger sites where they need it can have the higher speed connectivity, but all the smaller sites can now access options at very low price points and build in alternatives like 4G connectivity and so on, which in a traditional network, that was a very difficult thing to do. It was typically a stack of services that were being provided by typically a carrier. The other approach that this and the main benefit that we see retailers getting from this technology is to be able to extract better performance out of that internet layer than they would have traditionally been able to do. So we've worked with many enterprises and many within the retail sector where they've used this technology to either reduce dependency on MPLS or add so much additional internet capacity that they can effectively run business critical systems over the internet transport. So they get the ability to move the traffic between different types of connectivity as much as they want, but we're able to improve the quality of the internet portion of that to such a degree that it now becomes suitable for carrying that business critical traffic. Kangwon, is there anything you'd like to add to that, just in terms of how this technology is sort of enabling these these benefits?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so one of the key benefits is like to be able to bring up the store quickly, right? So a lot of times, if you're in like a remote location, right, you may not have access to the wire circuit, especially MPLS, right? You may be able to get the broadband, but the ability to onboard, right, or start a store using a 4G link, right? I mean, is becoming very attractive, right, to the retail customer, right, or even a pop-up retail, right, a store that may need to be there for only a couple of weeks or a couple of months, right, may not justify the cost of having to lay the new circuit, right, into the location. But that means the underlying technology, right, has to be able to build. That's why we kept talking about the overlay, right, in the context of SD-WAN, is because that overlay allows the SD-WAN device to basically be independent of the underlying transport. Right? So what it means is you can have any type of circuit, right, whether it is private, public, internet, wire, or wireless. We build an overlay across all these available tunnels, right, all these available circuits, right, and across this overlay, or what we call the tunnels, we can measure the performance characteristics of each of the circuit in real time, right, and based on the characteristics of the applications, right, maybe voice, you may want to put it on a more reliable link, right, and that is purely driven by a policy, right, that can be controlled at the global level. So what it means is an IT admin doesn't need to go site by site and do the configuration change, but now they have the visibility and control at the global level in terms of setting the policy, right, for all the stores.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Kangwon. And that definitely ties in with the experience we've seen. And really to illustrate this point about the quality. So the whole perception of poor internet performance has been one of the things that's held a lot of retailers back from adopting this technology on a broad basis, or at the very least, ensuring that they were not completely dependent on the internet, because in many cases it just wasn't reliable enough, and the data would certainly support that in most cases. What we've seen as a really crystal clear example of the benefits we can deliver with the cloud-delivered SD-WAN solution is the idea of using multiple low-cost circuits at a location, particularly at a retail store, and using the SD-WAN technology across the top is something that can be an enabler for a much greater level of performance. And this example here is taken from one of our customer deployments where they had, in the past, no real way of getting good quality internet connectivity to their locations. They were either forced to use poor quality and not have any usable capacity really at all, or use very expensive and very thin bandwidth MPLS connectivity that just limited their ability to use the applications they wanted. So in this scenario, they implemented two low-cost internet circuits, which are the bottom two of the three bars here. And you can see from this that they saw very poor performance on each one. Out of a score from 1 to 10, it's clear here that neither of these links would have supported enterprise-grade communications at all. What we saw by adding the SD-WAN layer across the top and the overlays across that, and all of the performance mitigation that comes with the SD-WAN solution, is that they delivered a solution that was much more acceptable from a business perspective. And this is in a high-cost telecommunications market in Asia, actually a site sitting in Indonesia, where even getting a connection that in some markets might be considered, it's not the perfect 10 out of 10, but this was such a dramatic improvement over what the client was able to get previously that this was seen as a huge business success, and it has acted as an enabler for many new services, voice and video training and so on, to be delivered out to these locations, because there's now the ability to get that higher level of performance without the price point that was traditionally associated with that type of service. And if we look at what that translates into from a commercial perspective. One of the examples we often turn to is a market in the region that at a superficial level people might think is quite easy to deliver services into, where market like Australia, it's a westernized market, but the challenge that retailers face in this market is it is highly variable in terms of the availability of products. So there is a large initiative underway to implement a national fiber-based backbone network and have this step change in the availability of low-cost, high-bandwidth services. But for many retailers, they will be the first to mention that this is a promise that has been on the table for many years without really any follow-through. So enterprises and retailers in particular are faced with this choice as they start to have to meet all of those demands we spoke about earlier. They're struggling to find the right technology choice to deliver on that. And they're either considering going down the path of implementing high-capacity fiber-based services with long contract terms, long lead times, lots of implementation costs, or stick with what they have and fail to deliver on all of the business benefits and the demands that are coming from the business side. So what we're finding is that SD-WAN is effectively allowing us to enable a very different delivery approach in these markets, where we can take some of these legacy products, so products that may not necessarily be good enough on their own. And one big challenge in Australia in particular is the upstream bandwidth of the ADSL services. And enterprises and retailers in particular often need that ability to push content from the sites up into the network. And doing that on a 384 or 512K upstream DSL circuit is next to impossible. So what we're doing with the SD-WAN solution is bonding several of these connections together. So we can go out and get 2 or 3 of these very low cost, very short contract term DSL services, add 4G into the mix as a media diversity factor. And now we've ended up in a position where we're delivering sufficient capacity for the initiatives that the retailers are looking to enact. But we're not doing it by locking ourselves into a long-term connectivity contract structure. There's the ability here, as those locations become eligible for the next generation of connectivity products and better price points and vastly higher upstream and downstream bandwidth, we can just swap those out on a site-by-site basis, and there's no interruption to the services and the applications that are running across the top of it. So I think this is a really good example of how we can use the SD-WAN technology to unlock some functionality that would not have been possible using traditional networks. And designing that type of solution where you've got 2 or 3 ADSL circuits and 4G, we've certainly done a lot of that in traditional networks. And Kangwon, I know you have on the traditional routed networks. It's fair to say, I think, that would have been close to impossible with a traditional solution and actually have a workable solution. I think you'd agree with that?
Right, definitely. And I would even say that compared to a single fiber link, right, by having the 3 DSL plus 1 wireless actually give you a much more availability, right, for the whole site, right, because now you add not only diversity, but you have the wire and wireless options available as the WAN connectivity. The reason that, this is not a new concept, right? We actually think about this long time ago, but it was not easy to implement in the traditional solution, because in order to make use of all these available links effectively, we have to really tune the routing protocol, right? And to be able to utilize all the links and continue to keep tuning that routing protocol as an ongoing basis is just not trivial, right? Given the number of sites that the typical retail customer has. And that's why technology like SD-WAN make all this possible, because, the dynamic packet steering, right? Be able to use all the links in the active fashion and basically be able to bond, right, all the DSL links together so that you get the improved bandwidth even just for a single flow. So that's that's kind of what makes the concept of using diverse links, right? I mean, really, really possible.
Right. That's. I think we'd absolutely agree with that based on our experience. So we've got a couple of examples of how we've applied this in the retail sector and used this technology to either overcome challenges or act as an enabler. Kangwon, I might pass this first one back to you. I know you were closely involved in this one, which is a large Fortune 500 retailer. Would you like to maybe speak about some of the challenges that they were facing here and the initial conversations you had and
yeah, definitely.
what we were able to do with SD-WAN?
Yeah, definitely. So basically this company come to us, actually they're working with a service provider partner of ours. So basically their requirement is voice is the lifeline of the store, right? If the store does all the business selling parts, right, auto parts, and that's why basically for them the phone call into the store is very, very important, right? Because basically if the customer call in and then the line is busy or they cannot reach anyone at the store, they might just turn away and then go to the competitor. And they actually have the initiative to basically reduce the cost because even the store has a single MPLS today, it's not always reliable, right? I mean, the circuit cut could happen, the link could go down, right? Even if they have some of the bigger store have the internet as a backup, but then when they have to do a failover from the primary to the backup internet link, right? Primary MPLS to the backup internet link, the convergence time is so long that it may end up disconnecting all the active calls. So that's why they've been looking for a solution that allow them to be, number one, be able to have a 99.999% uptime for all the voice call, right? And the only way to do that really is to add diversity into the circuit. And so with this type of technology, what it allows them to do is to start really looking at the size of the store and segmenting them out, right? Maybe they used to have MPLS before, a single MPLS. They could move them to either a hybrid, right, add an internet link, or in some cases, migrate to a dual internet link. And then utilize the SD-WAN technology to really make use of all the available links at the same time. And actually what you're seeing here on the screen on the left is what actually happened in the store. And this is one of the larger sites that has the hybrid connectivity, right? One MPLS and cable. So what happened is on Sunday morning, right, which is the time that the store is typically very busy, right? Because we'll call in and then get the auto parts, and they basically lost their MPLS link, right? And then what happened at that point, SD-WAN dynamically just moved the traffic over to the cable link, but then at the same time, that cable link is also dropping packet, right? Approximately 1.5%. But because of the dynamic error correction, right, that the SD-WAN technology can apply onto the tunnel, like we were able to maintain the quality of the voice calls, right, throughout the duration that the MPLS circuit went down. Basically from the store, the user experience, they don't even know that something already happened, right, in the network, beside the alert that the operator received.
Right. I think that's a really powerful example, and a very different experience that you would see in a traditional network where you'd be immediately impacted by those types of outages. So we wanted to give one other example of what we've done using this technology. So this is more of an example of how we've helped a retailer adopt this SD-WAN technology from a process perspective, because we recognize that in many organizations, particularly larger enterprises, there is not necessarily the appetite to just jump straight into this technology, and there's often a need to do some planning work and some mapping of future state requirements to the capabilities of the products and so on. So in this particular scenario, the client engaged us to start helping them build that roadmap. So they knew they had problems with the current network. They had high levels of equipment failure. They had single points of failure across almost all of their locations. And they were in a position where they wanted to get away from having to manage individual devices with individual configurations and add a much greater level of automation into the network. So coming into it, they had many of the characteristics that would indicate that SD-WAN could be a good fit, but they weren't ready to just jump straight into a deployment of that at that point. So we built the business case for the adoption of the technology based on a number of different factors. So we looked at the operational benefits of automating large parts of the network from, across the whole life cycle of a site, from the provisioning of a new site to the ongoing management, change management, reporting, and so on. And we were able to demonstrate very high levels of efficiency across the board there. We factored in things like the reduction in downtime that we could achieve by bringing alternative connectivity forms into the mix, like 4G connectivity, and got to a point where we proposed the concept of different service level packages to the retailers, so they could choose, depending on the needs of a particular location, what combination of connectivity and service would best meet their requirements. And having that in sort of a menu-driven approach meant that they could have a high degree of predictability and have the ability to show the business side what their options were and really quantify the costs associated with doing that. So that continued on into a proof of concept. So we identified a number of locations across about 7 countries where the retailer wanted to gain the hands-on experience. So we cut over from their existing production network to the cloud-delivered SD-WAN solution, and we're able to achieve that, typically with a few minutes of a cutover time at each of the locations. And then immediately, as soon as those locations came online, we were able to start showing them the reporting data, application usage, network circuit performance, and so on, without any customized configuration for them. So once that was completed, we worked with the client to do a whole variety of tests on that environment and help them quantify the benefits of this solution. And from that point onwards, they proceeded with a broader decision then to implement this technology across the network. But if I look at the benefits that they've achieved from going down this fairly structured path, they were able at each stage in the process here to demonstrate to the business that they were not just looking at a technology for technology's sake, but that they were aligning this with what the business was asking IT to deliver in terms of a platform for future applications and services that they wanted to enable out at each of the locations in the network. So this overall was deemed a very significant success based on the outcome of the proof of concept, and then the rollout then validated those benefits across a large number of locations. So if we look at how we tend to summarize the value for retail organizations that we can deliver using this technology. So we tend to see the value coming in 3 main categories. So there are many more benefits, and different enterprises will see benefits in many different ways, but the ones that tend to resonate the most with retailers, first of all, there is a dramatically lower provisioning time with this type of solution. So we regularly see clients that will bring a new store up on a 4G connection or multiple 4G connections because they haven't been given enough time or notice from their facilities team. They're negotiating a lease right up until the last moment, and then they get 2 weeks notice before the site needs to go live. That sounds like an exaggeration, but we hear that across retailers all over the world on a very regular basis. And it's an impossible task in a traditional network for the IT department to be able to deliver on. But we can achieve that both in that rapid deployment mode of you're bringing a site up on 4G, but then also using very short lead time local ISP broadband products to add into the mix once the connectivity becomes available. So very quickly we can have that site up and running on its full production connectivity. The savings that we can deliver using this solution, so much of this is coming from an ability to leverage connectivity that is at a much lower price point than would otherwise be needed to deliver on the demands of the retail organizations, all the extra bandwidth and functionality and so on. In a traditional network, you're talking about very high price point fiber-based services to deliver on that, which are out of reach for many retailers. So we see a range of savings here, but the Asia Pac market is a great example of where we've been able to consistently deliver at about a third of the price point of a traditional MPLS-based network, for example. And then very much related to that second point is this additional bandwidth and throughput that we can deliver and extra reductions in transaction times and transfer times across the network. Part of that is coming from the fact that these local ISP broadband products are inherently higher bandwidth products. So in many cases, the retailer is actually benefiting from infrastructure that's put in place for the consumer market and the end user market. That's driving a big increase in the capacity of these edge networks, and retailers and other organizations buying these broadband products are effectively piggybacking on the benefits that are being implemented for those residential clients. So that ability to access those in-country price points as well as the capacity that comes with those products is something that we're seeing be a real game changer for these enterprises as they obviously the bandwidth demands aren't going away anytime soon, and these are the products that can enable that type of value to be delivered to the retailer. And if we look at the benefits in a slightly different mechanism, and we look at how we work with enterprises to quantify these benefits and adopt the technology, it tends to start with the whole concept of building a credible business case for the technology. So enterprises rarely will rush into a large change across their environment, and it has to really start with, from the bottom up, quantifying the savings that we can deliver across each component of the solution. So we start with the circuit infrastructure. We look at how we can quantify the benefits there by procuring local provider in-country broadband products and perhaps deferring upgrades on the MPLS network, or in some cases eliminating the MPLS network. It really depends on the organization. And perhaps most importantly, being able to leverage all of the capacity at a particular location. So not have this concept of active and passive circuits, but have all of the capacity available there for use. So that's one area where we can build this very effective business case. The second is around equipment, and one of the really key benefits of this whole solution is the as-a-service model, where we get away from this model of equipment capex and the maintenance contracts associated with that equipment, and move to a model where there is almost a SaaS model for the enterprise network, where equipment is provided as part of the solution. There's no maintenance charges or capex involved at all, and it is very much aligned with what retailers want in terms of the ability to scale up and scale down as they need to match their changing business requirements. And then this is the final benefit, is one that's perhaps most relevant to retailers, which is these tend to be very broadly dispersed networks with a lot of nodes sitting on that network, a lot of stores that need connectivity to the network, and the operational overhead of managing that type of environment can be extremely significant. So we're able to leverage this technology to drive a huge level of automation into that network, and then be able to reduce the chance of error, reduce other risks in the network from a change management perspective, and start to enable the enterprise in many cases to do self-service changes and so on the network. Now, an interesting side effect of this is the vendor management aspect of it. So the move to more local ISP, broadband products and so on delivers a great number of benefits. However, it does require a very effective solution for managing those additional vendors that get added into the mix. and this is an area that we regularly work with enterprises to help, is the ability to leverage all of those very low price points and very high bandwidth from the in-country providers, but to provide a strong vendor management overlay across the top of that so that the enterprise doesn't have to face dealing with all of the individual components of the solution. So you have to get that component right in order to not necessarily lose the benefits of the business case in the overhead of managing those vendors. So these are things that we work with enterprises really every day of the week to help address, and we find that the overall solution is very strong from a business case benefit. And particularly in the Asia Pac market, we find that the savings that we can deliver using this technology are most significant on that infrastructure side, because we're accessing price points that are just very different from the offers from the traditional providers of these types of solutions. So, when we approach retailers to help address challenges in their networks and leverage this type of technology, we always start with that end in mind of, where can we help? Where are the problem areas in that environment today? What is the IT department being tasked with delivering that is just not possible with the current technology or platform? And how can we do this in a way that is demonstrating value to the business, throughout the whole process? So having a well-structured approach for that to understand the current challenges, understanding where you're trying to get to, and then leveraging really effective technology like this as the enabler for some of those benefits, that's really where we tend to focus as a business. So, we always come back to that question about how can we help, and if there are any questions following this related to how we can work with an enterprise to deliver some of these benefits, we'd obviously welcome the opportunity to do so. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Sasha. I think we probably have some questions from the audience. We want to leave a few minutes at the end here. So Sasha, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Kangwan. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We do have a couple of questions, so we'll try to get to all of them live. Please don't hesitate to ask. So with that, let's see. The first question, maybe Kiran, you can start, and then Kangwan can add. Do we need to install SD-WAN software at both sender side and receiver side?
Okay. Kangwan will definitely have something to add on this. But so the most common mode of deployment for this solution is a lightweight appliance that gets deployed at each point on the network. So a branch office would have a small edge device that would connect to its WAN and LAN sides, and that acts as the endpoint for the VPN connectivity and for internet browsing and so on. There are options to virtualize that, and we've worked with many organizations who are really interested in this packaged approach where they've got a multi-function device that's providing lots of different services at the retail edge, and this can become a virtualized service sitting within that. And then at the data center end, we have a range of different options. Again, some are appliance-based, and then we see clients also looking at virtualized solutions there. The other option is that we can use existing VPN head-end devices at data centers as interconnect points. Kangwan, that might be something you'd like to share a bit more detail on?
So typically, like, SD-WAN is like a dual-ended solution, right? Because it builds tunnels, so you need to have typically devices on both ends. So basically, if the application is on premise, right, that is fairly easy, right? You can just put a device on the branch, another device in the data center, and that will work just fine. But in some scenario, when you actually want to access the application in the cloud, right, could be your SaaS applications, could be maybe your VPC, right, in AWS or Azure, and that's not always possible, right, to install another box or another appliance, or even the software, right, in the SaaS provider data center, right? So what we, some of the vendors, like such as VeloCloud, what we do also provide is basically a service, that utilize the cloud gateway, so that this is basically a software that is hosted by like the SD-WAN company like VeloCloud, right? And when your destination, right, when your application is like fast or in the cloud, you basically utilize the cloud gateway as the other side of the tunnel without having to install any software yourself, right? So that's one of key benefit of being cloud delivered, right? Is that you don't have to have an appliance on the other side, right? In case of your application hosted in the cloud.
All right. So thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Once again, I encourage the audience to submit the questions. All right. And Kieran, this is probably for you. So what type of connectivity should we be considering? And I'm assuming that this is going to apply to APAC, and maybe you guys can talk about it in general and then specifically in the Asia Pacific region.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at what the majority of our retail clients are doing, they're building packages depending on the size of the store. So we see that at the lowest end being something like a dual 4G package at the lowest end, where it's a store that maybe is out of reach for traditional wired connectivity, but still needs to be relatively highly available and connected to the network. So that's one package they'll tend to go with. And then above that, it tends to be that they will have single broadband connection locations, then dual broadband locations, and very often will augment that with 4G connectivity as well. And if I look at how that applies to the Asia Pac market, there is increasingly good availability of high capacity in-country local provider broadband products that can deliver 50 megs plus at these locations at a very low price point. And that tends to be the direction that our retail clients are gravitating towards. They're adopting products like that have sub $100 a month price points, but delivering a very significant amount of bandwidth. So that is probably the single most popular type of connectivity that we're seeing retailers adopt. We are seeing some that still keep MPLS in the mix. So perhaps they've got a hosted voice solution for the store that runs over MPLS, or other legacy applications, engine-free systems and so on that need to connect back to a data center and have traditionally run over MPLS. So that is still a part of a lot of the retail networks that we work with, but a decreasing part of those networks, I think it's fair to say, especially as lower cost and more available alternatives come into play on the internet side.
All right, Conran, do you want to add anything, or should we move on?
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next question, Cesar.
Okay, so how do we deal with securing credit card details, card payment solutions on the network? Kieran, this might be for you.
Perhaps this might be, Kangwon, do you want to start on this one? Maybe just to explain how from an encryption perspective and so on?
Yeah, so I think, we didn't touch on that a whole lot during the session, right? But one of the key benefits that SD-WAN brings is basically secure key management, right? So with the requirement that the sending like the PCI data, right, across the internet, right, you need to make sure that everything is encrypted, and then we don't store the key, right? So by utilizing like technology like PKI, right, that is integrated into the solution, we make sure that the traffic is always encrypted, the key is always rotated, right, and managed appropriately, right? So this is done regardless of whether or not you use the perceived secure link like MPLS, right, or the unsecure link like the internet, right? Traffic is always encrypted. The other thing that has to do with segmenting the traffic, right, making sure that you carve out the PCI traffic, right, into the appropriate VLAN, right, and encrypt that segment appropriately, so that it doesn't interfere with all the other like corporate or the guest traffic, right? And be able to completely isolate and that traffic from your PCI data, basically.
Great. That is exactly what we've seen work really well in these environments with retail clients. And even the ability to just demonstrate that there is encryption end-to-end over the network and then have separation, different VLANs at the sites for different functions and different security policies for those VLANs. There are ways to demonstrate that with traditional networks, but the ability to show that level of consistency across the network with profiles holding all of the common configurations and so on, that alone we see being a big improvement for retailers as they deal with PCI compliance issues and so on. So definitely a big step forward there.
All right, thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. So the next one is, to connect a new retail site, how can VeloCloud help apart from configuring and providing the box? Do you also help in providing connectivity from different service providers?
Okay, yeah, I can take that definitely. So I think that's where we, as Co-Evolve, we can add a lot of value with retailers that are interested in the technology, but they need an overall solution. So most of our deployments start, at that very bottom layer. They start at the connectivity layer. So we can work with the retailer to help source the necessary connectivity from dozens of different ISPs and other service providers to provide that foundational connectivity layer, and not do that with a lowest common denominator approach, but actually optimize that down to the individual site level, and then put vendor management capabilities around that to reduce the overhead. Then we can help on a turnkey basis to deliver the SD-WAN solution across the top. So everything from helping to get the sites created in the centralized orchestrator, help distribute the activation links to the site contacts, provide support during the activation process. And this is a very easily activated service, and most of our clients use non-IT staff at their locations to bring up these services, but we do find that having that additional support that we can provide during those activities can make a real difference to just ensuring even the outliers are activated successfully. So we've got a very well-tested approach and methodology that we apply to helping enterprises that are interested in the technology, but they require it as a full service model. And that can be modular, so if there's a component that the enterprise can do themselves or want to do themselves, they can do that. Anything where they don't have that capability, we can fill those gaps and provide a full end-to-end service around that, and really deliver all of the benefits we've talked today around the technology, but as part of that service model.
All right, thank you. One more question. Can you please share the E2E architecture, including this cloud gateway connectivity and deployment?
Kangwon, do you want to start maybe on that one?
Yeah, but I think it might be somewhat difficult to explain it. But let me try anyway, right? So typically the way it works is, like in the typical enterprise deployment, right? You would put, and let's assume here that you have the hybrid WAN connectivity, right? You have MPLS and you have internet at the headquarters or the regional hub, and then at the remote locations, you may have a mix of some site being internet only and some site being hybrid, right? So the way it would work is you would add the VeloCloud Edge or the SD-WAN device, right, at the branch locations, as well as at the regional hub or the data center locations. So, and then basically what happened is they form an overlay network, right, between all these devices, and then allow them to be able to do dynamic packet steering and be independent from the underlying transport. But then in addition to that, right, if you also consume SaaS applications, and you're trying to figure out how do I send my SaaS traffic directly, right, into the internet, and still be able to gain the benefit of dynamic packet steering, the QoS visibility that I get when I have the devices on both sides, right, of my network in the branch and in the regional hub. That is when you can make use of the cloud gateway that is provided as a service. So when your destination is on the internet or basically maybe your SaaS applications, the other end of the overlay is basically the cloud gateway. Right? So the benefit of that is for the SaaS destinations, you really don't have to deploy additional device, right, to be the other side of the tunnel, because that is already made available to you as a service.
All right, Kieran, do you want to add anything to that? I think we have time for one more question, but if you have more information on this one that kind of answered, then go ahead.
No, I think that's, I think let's go to the last question, actually.
Okay, so how do we start evaluating if SD-WAN is relevant to our retail network?
That's a good question. So I think if we look at the use cases we found for this technology, there's a pretty long list there. So we tend to find that the enterprises that benefit the most from this technology are ones where there is that gap between the expectations of the business and what their network is capable of delivering today, because they tend to be the enterprises that require some sort of significant change in that environment. So not just small incremental upgrades over what they've got, but they're the ones that are out there looking at completely new transport solutions and much higher capacity to be delivered across the network in order to keep up with what the business is asking of them. So for that reason, they tend to be the type of business that will benefit most from this technology, because this is often an enabler for those benefits without having to deal with the expense or the complexity of the alternative ways of getting there. So it's probably true of most retailers these days that they're not entirely happy with the capacity or the price points or the price per meg or any number of metrics that they've got on that wide area network. So we mentioned at the beginning that retail is one of the clearest cut cases for the deployment of SD-WAN, and it really comes about from that. The fact that so many of the changes in the retail sector have happened over the past few years, with a lot of new offerings and new products out there to improve the ability to track visitors to the store and to provide new content to those visitors and so on. And achieving that with the traditional network is becoming very, very difficult for these enterprises. So it's probably true that most retailers will benefit from this type of solution, and the ones that have those challenges today are the ones where there's the strongest case for it.
All right. Well, we're running out of time, so we're going to wrap up here. I know we have a couple more questions that are left unanswered, but we will answer them via email after the event. So I'd like to thank our audience. Thank you for joining, listening, and participating. And also thank you, Kieran and Kangwarn, for presenting. And we'll see you on our next webinar. The next one is in November for North America. And we're going to have a couple more specific to Asia Pacific, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.